And how are we doing today, everybody? This is Michael Durr from Michael Durr Photography. Thanks for joining me today. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my post-processing workflow and how it relates to portrait work specifically. But honestly, it doesn't really matter if you shoot weddings, if you shoot portraiture, if you shoot sports. I think the processing part can apply to whatever field that you happen to shoot the most of. So for me, it's just an area that I know everybody uses their own style. Everybody's got their own methods. This is not so much a tutorial about how to retouch, how to take advantage of Photoshop to its fullest, take advantage of all the Lightroom tools and tricks. There's just too many of that to go for. So this is really just a very quick, brief intro into how I like to use it. I'll talk about basically the process of culling to adding metadata to bring it to Lightroom and Photoshop and going from there. So, we'll just kind of start off with my first favorite software, which is Photomechanic, and that's this little button right here, this little software. And what I like to do is I like to use this for my primary overall viewing, culling, captioning process for everything. So this is a recent card that I just used the other day at an event where a lot of models and photographers got to meet up and take shots. And this allows me to just kind of quickly scroll through as many shots as I took, which were probably that too many just because I was using a lot of artificial lighting. And I'd only have maybe a couple minutes with each model, but there's a handful here that I think can work for edits relatively well. And so the whole premise behind culling down is narrowing down, right? So if you shoot a lot, if you're a high volume shooter, and there are a lot of high volume portrait photographers, it doesn't have to be necessarily sports shooters or wedding photographers only. A lot of portrait shooters I've noticed tend to be pretty heavy on the shutter. And if that's the case, you have a longer process trying to weed that down to your top selects. So this is my process, and I just kind of go through it with this area here. So for instance, this is an area where I had a quick 2 or 3 minutes with a wonderful model named Della out of Los Angeles. And you can tell right off the bat, there's just a couple that were overexposed by probably a full stop. But either which way, I tend to like to go through all of these, and I feel like I can recover that. So if you look at the bottom of this screen right here, this little box I like to use, and I just press T. T as in Tom. And that really tags every image that I want to keep as a potential image that I would edit further down the road. Because there's a lot that are going to be misfires. There's going to be shots where, hair is in the face. It's just kind of a in-between. She wasn't particularly ready. Look, there we go. There's a completely out of focus picture. So there's a lot of reasons why you won't select images. Now, the more experience that you have in any particular field, whether it's weddings, whether it's sports, you start to identify what makes a good picture or what makes a picture that you like stand out and what doesn't make the cut. So you'll be faster as you continually do this. But the software itself makes me very fast at doing this. So I can kind of comb through at this full speed. These are all raw images, and I'll just kind of quickly see the bottom here. Tag whatever ones that I think, okay, that's a keeper, that's not a keeper. I'll kind of go through, and this is about the speed that I will go through a lot of images, especially when I do event coverage for jobs, assignments that are for weddings, marketing, anything like that. I will go through it about this speed. When it comes to portrait work, I'm a little bit more deliberate naturally. So I will tend to look through things a little bit more. That's a little bit too much hair for me to try to recover in the face. So, that's acceptable. That's kind of a natural feel to it. So I'll tag that one. And as you kind of comb through some of these, you start to notice like this is a broad lit image, which I don't actually do a whole lot of. But because I had one lighting setup, which was a softbox to camera right, I really just maximized as much as we could within this space. So people have different methods about, okay, well, I'm going to take a couple shots here with the light here. I'll move the strobe over on this side. I'll modify it again with this diffusion. I'm not really too much like that. I like to maximize as much time as I can with that specific model. If I feel that model is not giving me a whole lot, or there's just not a chemistry there, I'll probably cut the session short. But in a couple minutes, we were able to bang out like maybe 60, 70 pictures, and a pretty good selection of stuff that she was cheating towards a light. She was working against it, all sorts of different areas, and that I think brought such a variety overall. She obviously is very experienced, so she was able to utilize her figure, her face, her hands, her arms in ways that I think there was plenty of material there for us to kind of find something to work with, and anything that I thought was sticking, I was able to kind of say let's go back to that. Let's revisit something, and or let's skip it. So there, I've just kind of quickly done, I selected, I don't know, maybe a handful. And so you'll go here to view, and I'll just go to tagged. And here's, 7 shots. And the cool thing about it is now I have a top 7 selects, right? And I could probably even weed this down even further and just decide which one I really like the most. So for instance, like between these two are pretty similar. I really like the body language here, but because the back of the hands with females tends to look a little bit larger, I would probably elect to keep this one out as opposed to this one. This one showcases the hands being a little bit on the larger side, even though they're not. They're just appropriately normal size hands. So, and so I'll be able to untag that one, and it'll just kind of go back out, and now it's called back down to a top 6, which makes it easier and faster, right? So that's the basic process there. The other thing that I like to do is that if I go Command A, I like to apply metadata or information on how the shoot was, where it was, the date, all those types of things. And this is a great feature that you can do for a batch edit of 1,000 pictures, 10 pictures, or 7 or 6, whatever we have. And this kind of has a lot of the basic stuff, right? So this says studio fashion shoot with, and then in here is kind of a variable of, who the person I shot, images made at location, blah, 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 blah. And so when I do all this, and it has all my copyright, it has keywords, has instructions for my copyrights, all those types of things, I will just apply it to that batch. And it's just like, ta-da. So now when I go into it, it shows the full take of studio fashion shoot with Los Angeles model Della, images made at FD Food Studios, blah, 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 blah. So it's all set and ready to go. So I'll just kind of bring in one of these images. So let's just say, for instance, I don't know, I kind of like this one. We're going to choose this one as an edit, even though it doesn't have necessarily the traditional features of, eyes, catch lights, the full face, all that. I just kind of like the feel of it. So, sue me. I like this picture. I'll bring it in, and I'll just literally drag this into Lightroom. And don't mind these pictures. These are from an older assignment. Okay. And so I'm just going to import that. Okay, and so the first thing that I like to do right off the bat is I like to get it into the basic composition that I want to, which is there's a lot of space around this image, so I'm going to actually crop this in a little bit. And I'm kind of the school of thought that every image could use a little bit of a crop. It could be 10%, it could be 80%, but I like to bring my attention into the real onus of the image. Like, what are you paying attention? You don't really need all this extra background in that frame. So to me, that's kind of about, somewhere, I'm not going to get too crazy here, but about, let's try there. Okay. And the other thing is white balance. So this seems a little bit warm to me. And I did not have a color checker or a gray card on me at the time, so I will kind of just hover this over and click something there, and that looks a little bit cool. So I'll just kind of find in between. So that was originally, I think, around 5,700 Kelvin. This is now at 42. Over here on the temperature side, I will just kind of bump this up to a point where it kind of suits my eye. And I think let's just keep it right here around 5,000. And that looks pretty good to me. So you can kind of tell right off the bat it's before and after. By the way, if you ever wanted to look in Lightroom between before and after, the quick shortcut is Y. I use it all the time. Other shortcuts would be full, which is a full frame. That's F. And then back to kind of the editing area, which is D. So going to Y, you can just quickly kind of compare and contrast like how it was in its raw format to its white balanced area, and that just suits me. Now I'm still going to add more features to this in Lightroom. I have a lot of presets where I kind of tone the colors of it to it, and so this is one I know for sure that I kind of tend to like, which is this right here and that right there. This is actually pretty nice. This has a nice little rosy texture to it, and you can kind of see the difference right there. So that's about what I would need to do in terms of the basic edit and tone. I may bring up these levels a little bit. I think I might bring down the highlight on the right side of her face a little bit. So I'll bring that down. I might bring the shadows up just a little bit. And I really don't touch a whole lot of these areas here. The clarity, the dehaze, the vibrance, the saturation. Unless it's a different type of shot. But for something like this, I really don't touch a whole lot of this. I will make sure that the lens corrections are on. Detail, I'm really not going to do anything with the sharpening here because I tend to bring this into Photoshop afterwards just to kind of clean up any potential blemishes or anything like that. And I may not even necessarily do that for this example just because it's just going to take a little bit more of a time to do it. But you get the general idea of how the edit goes. I will bring up a kind of hair and lashes area, which is just presets where I bring up the highlights, a little clarity, and I will do this for the hair. Now, the way that I can really see that is if I just kind of bring this exposure up a lot, and then I will bring that preset, that adjustment here, and I will kind of go around. And, for a lot of people that are probably watching this and saying, a real photographer would have probably just added a secondary light and created a hair light, a key light, a kicker light, anything that would accent her and separate her hair from the background. And it's like, well, that's true. But like I said, sometimes you only have a couple minutes and you kind of work with what you have, not to make excuses. But I think it worked overall, and it's just kind of something that you learn from every time. But this has a nice overall feel to it for me. I'll bump up the exposure just a little bit. And so now you can kind of see the difference right there. That's basically as much as I would need to do for this image. What I would do is I would like to soften the skin, and that is something I actually use. I use a plugin. It's called Color Effects Pro. And I'll just bring that in, edit that in there. And it almost automates it. It just kind of quickly softens a little bit of the skin. And I don't like to go overboard because then you kind of really notice that the texture is all sorts of messed up. But this is a good way for me to just kind of soften it a little bit before I go into the final, which is Photoshop. Okay, so these are just from previous edits that I've done, and you can adjust all these sliders here, color, small details, medium, large, and the more aggressive that you go, the more aggressive that look ultimately becomes, and you can kind of see how weird that looks. So I tend to keep it, around an area that I just through experience have worked with plenty of times, and it just kind of it's subtle, but works for me. So this is where I am like before, and then after just so slightly softens it up. I'll save that, and it'll bring me right back to Lightroom, and I'll have a before and after. So I'll basically have two versions. Here is the new, slightly softened skin one, and this is the original. And so if you kind of see, here is original, back to the newer version. You can see it's a very slight difference, but I think helps out a lot. And I haven't done anything in Photoshop yet. So, but if you don't really use Photoshop to its fullest extent, which I understand because it's a process, it takes a little bit more time. This is a suitable image. I'm sure, for an Instagram post, it'd probably be just fine right off the bat, but if I'm putting this on my portfolio and putting it on my website, I'm probably going to put a little bit more effort into it, and I will just kind of bring it into Photoshop and just kind of tweak some of any potential blemishes, dodging and burning, and there's just so much that you can use in Photoshop that there's probably not enough time to really go into it, and I'm certainly not qualified to do that anyways. But I will just start off. I'll create a layer, and I'll just work on that layer, and then maybe add another layer for kind of smoothing out the skin a little bit more. So let's see here. Okay, so to go in, and I'm usually a little bit faster on this with my Wacom tablet. Because I have a microphone kind of set up right in my desk right in front of me, I am just going to use this mouse on the side here, so it's just a little bit easier. And I'm just kind of sampling areas, and I don't really take away kind of like little birthmarks here. That's no problem there. I really just kind of work on little blemishes overall, and just clean things up, clean the area, and try to take and sample from the most similar areas. So you're not going to sample from over here because that color and luminosity is so much different than this one over here in kind of the shadow area. So it's pretty similar areas to there, here to there. And you can go and you can do this ad nauseum. You can do this for hours if you want to. And she's got fantastic skin, all things considered. So I really don't have to do as much with her as some other people. And it's no judgment on anybody. That we're all just, we're all humans. But this, she will, even if she doesn't notice the difference because she's never going to see the original, she will appreciate, this helps out a lot. Makeup, a little bit of retouching can go a long ways. Okay, so if you kind of like zoom back out, here's the before, here's the after, before, after, and that's a pretty good, quick way to do it. I will add an extra layer on top of that, and I like to use the healing brush tool. The tool before I was using was the clone stamp, by the way. So right now I'm just using the healing brush, and I will sample from maybe, let's say, her arm over here, a very clean area. Okay, and I'm going to and that's an option click, by the way. I'll bring this down a little bit, and I'll just kind of pull down. And you can probably see how it's changing the overall texture. It's smoothing it out. You're not seeing as much definition in the skin. Now you're also seeing kind of little lines here that look not so great. And that's okay to me because the opacity is at 100 currently, and I'm going to bring that down drastically. We're probably going to bring that down to 70 or so. And so this is just kind of pulling down. And the reason why I like to pull down is usually because the lighting is consistent from top to bottom, as opposed to if I pulled this way, that light changes quite a bit. So that's the reason why I tend to bring it down a little bit. And yes, this naturally looks very, very weird. I can attest to that. In the first couple times I've done this, I was like, this looks weird as hell. And in any case, you kind of get the sense there. That actually looks really bad right there. I'll kind of do one back. I will just kind of do... Okay, so I will bring this slider down to 0, And I will now just start to bring it up a little bit. And so like there's about 34%. And here's the difference. Okay. And if I wanted to do that, I could keep doing that on kind of the eye level. But, at 100%, it looks weird as shit. And then here, around 35%, somewhere in that neighborhood, that seems to look a lot better. And I always kind of zoom back out and just kind of see how it feels on the overall. If it's really weird and noticeable, I'll bring it back down a little bit more realistically. Let's say 30. That way it's really not impeding much on the original overall image. And, these are obviously... So I have now basically, if I wanted to label this so you could see it, label 1 I kind of use as blemishes. Layered 1. And then layer 2 I pretty much kind of do is like skin softening. That way you just kind of have an idea. And I just know from experience this is kind of my system that I use. So it goes from there to skin softening. And that way I can always kind of go back. I can toggle off and on which one was doing what. And then from there, I pretty much do my sharpening. So I'll go into filter, sharpen. I like unsharp mask. I'm sure there are other areas that do a really nice job. Certain plugins, certain clarity. But I just always seem to like to use this. And there's a big difference there. And that actually seems a little bit strong to me at 100. I might bring that down just a little bit. And that's kind of nice right there. Okay, so and that's basically the finished product that I would use. And from here on out, it's just adjusting the size. And if I'm going to, let's say, for instance, send this into the U.S. Copyright Office, because I'm going to register all my images and that, you're just going to size it down to, I think it's like 600 pixels, that's 6 inches, and 100 DPI, right? And then if you're just going to put this on your website, you have your own sizes. I tend to do like 300 DPI at like 18 and a half inches at my long edge. That's kind of the areas that I like. And again, everybody's got their own workflow and everybody's got their own style. But this is kind of how I go from it. And then it goes to my website. And that way I can kind of, publish. And there you'll have images that can be purchased and downloaded and licensed right there. And it will have information on there specifically about, how much it would cost to license an image for this and everything. And then, of course, my models will also be privy to getting a lot of the images that we collaborated on anyways. So this is just kind of a process. Everybody's got their own methods. I tend to like to use this. It seems to be relatively fast for me. I'm sure there are faster ways. I'm sure there are better ways. Like I said, this wasn't so much designed to be a tutorial on how to do the best versions of your edits. This is just an insight into how I like to work. And maybe that kind of gives you a little bit of feedback, a little bit of insight on how you might want to go and pull different pieces of information from different places. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your time, and see you next time. Good luck out there and happy shooting. Thanks. Bye.